The birthplace of the Arab Spring is in crisis. Tunisia's president sacked the prime minister and put a freeze on parliament for 30 days. The biggest political party is calling it a coup. So what triggered the turmoil, and is democracy now at risk? This is Inside Story. Hello there, I'm Kamahl Santamaria. When a president dismisses a prime minister and effectively suspends parliament, well, it's a pretty messy political situation. Some call it a coup. Whatever it is, though, Tunisia is facing one of its biggest political crises since the Arab Spring 10 years ago. People were already angry at the government's handling of the pandemic, the poor economy, the high unemployment. They'd already been protesting for weeks. And then events took a dramatic turn on Sunday when President Kais Saied dismissed the Prime Minister and froze Parliament for 30 days. Soldiers blocked civil servants from entering government buildings. Security forces in civilian clothes even stormed Al Jazeera's bureau in Tunis and ordered journalists to leave. Ennahda, the biggest political party in Parliament, called it a coup and urged its supporters to protest.
The decisions by President Kais Saied are not correct, against the constitution and against reality. They bring us back to 1954. The scene of the parliament closed by tanks is very disgraceful.
Well, the president called his decisions, quote, necessary to save Tunisia and its people.
The first decision is to freeze all the powers of the parliament. The constitution does not allow the parliament to be dissolved, but it does not stand in the way of freezing all its work. The second decision is to lift the immunity of all members of parliament and for those of whom a case is related to. I will take care over the public prosecution.
But the sacked parliamentary speaker, who's also a co-founder of Ennahda, said the president acted above the law.
These decisions have no basis in the Constitution nor in the law, and we are against them, because in short it is a coup against the Constitution, a coup against the revolution, and a coup against public and private liberties in the country. The president made a misinterpretation that actually clashes with the reality.
Well, thousands of Tunisians celebrated the news on the streets of Tunis and praised the president.
It's the first time in my life I've heard the head of a state make a right decision. We've taken our country back. This is the first time we're out on the streets to celebrate.
You will often hear Tunisia referred to as the success story of the Arab Spring, the one where democracy actually prevailed. But that success didn't come easily, and it is now arguably at risk. Rewind to January of 2011. That was when protesters toppled Tunisia's longtime ruler Zine Al Abidine Ben Ali at the very beginning of the Arab Spring. Later that year, the Ennahda Party won Tunisia's first elections, but the country became sharply divided between the secular opposition and a government that wanted the country governed in line with Islamic values. In response to growing violence and unrest, a new constitution was agreed. That was 2 years later, 2014 by now, which split the power between the president and the prime minister. But in 2015, a series of ISIL attacks undermined Tunisia's vital tourism sector, and even though the threat was eventually contained, the economy never really recovered. By 2019, disillusioned voters were rejecting the mainstream parties, and political outsider Kais Saied was elected president. Parliament became increasingly fractured, with parties finding it difficult to form a government. Now analysts say a rivalry has developed between the big three, that is the president, the prime minister and the speaker, and it's preventing any effective action to deal with Tunisia's economic problems, not to mention the pandemic. So let's introduce you to today's panel, all of them in Tunisia. In the capital, Tunis, is Saida Ounissi, is a member of the Tunisian Parliament and an international spokesperson for the Ennahda Party. In Kairouan is Mesaoud Romdhani, a human rights activist, a member of the Executive Bureau of Euromed Rights, and on Skype from Tunis, Fadel Ali Reza, who is the editor-in-chief of Meshkal, a Tunisian news and analysis website. So thank you all for your time today on what has been a tumultuous day in your country. Saida Ounissi, let me come to you first of all. I'm not going to say this is a coup because there are, well, that's not for me to say. You tell me. Do you think it is?
Yes, I think the question is very clear here. It's a coup because from the moment you don't respect the constitution and you actually confiscate the powers into a single person who is at the same time beholding the legislative, the executive, and the judiciary powers all in the same time, and contrary to what say the constitution, I think we can only use one word. This is an attempt of a coup, and this is not a personal opinion, it's a fact, which has been backed actually by all political forces in Tunisia.
Did you and the Ennahda Party fear that something like this would happen, given all the unrest, given all the protests that have been going on for months now?
Well, the fact that the situation in Tunisia, the political crisis, the economic situation, the sanitary situation, the pandemic and its effect here, which is really, really concerning. And this is not, something which is new. We have been telling that since a moment now, but we don't think that the answer to that is to confiscate powers into one single institution. The response to that is not to send the army to the parliament. The response to that is not to consider that the judiciary power is now beholden by the one and only president of the republic. What we say again is that despite the emergency of the situation, going backwards in terms of democracy, in terms of respecting institutions, is not a solution. But we definitely need, obviously, to find out a clear path to go out from this crisis. But this is what we have been circulating now and telling and suggesting since months. I mean, we are one of the political forces who has been backing this last month, the initiative of one of the most important social organizations here, which is the UGTT, to go through a national dialogue and with no condition, with no, anything forbidden in that national dialogue. So, again, what is very concerning is the confiscation of the power could not be a solution to a political crisis.
Okay, well, you mentioned this, Saida, and for all three of you, I think we should just, and I can't believe I'm saying this, let's consult the Tunisian constitution, Article 80, which I've been looking at today, which says, among other things, in the event of imminent danger threatening the nation's institutions or the security or independence of the country, the President of the Republic may take any measures necessitated by the exceptional circumstances after consultation with the head of government and the Speaker and informing the President of the Constitutional Court. So, Mesaoud Romdhani, will bring you into the conversation now. He got part of that right. I guess he saw the situation as being that he needed to intervene, but then not only did he not consult with anyone, he kind of fired them or froze them.
In fact, that's right. I mean, there is no consultancy, although the president has said that he has consulted both the prime minister and the speaker. I doubt that because the speaker now is out of the parliament, out of work, and nobody would accept that. And we don't know where the prime minister is. And I believe whether you call it a coup or whatever else, I mean, it's now an exaggerated reading of the constitution, in fact, and means that the president has taken all the power in his hands, and now we have the military all around and closing the parliament and also closing all the entries of prime ministry, etc. So I don't have any else name. It's true, however, that the political situation, the political bickering, the economic situation, the belligerent situation after the pandemic, etc. All this, I mean, in 10 years we have been bickering where there are many problems. The political situation is not so good. All the different governments have done almost nothing to improve the economic and the social situation, which was the main cause of the revolution. It's true also that there are many times where there are harassments, problems, attacks on the media, etc. But at the same time, I mean, the solution would not come through that coup. It would come through more dialogue. And there were initiatives of a dialogue which might have included the parliament, might have included the prime minister, but also some economic experts, the civil society, and many others, and in order to get the country out of trouble. But I still keep hope, however, that everybody would be wise enough in order to get back things, get the clock back. I mean, and now it's really a shame that Tunisian revolution would go, after 10 years, would go that way and would have the military coming down, knowing that the military in Tunisia have saved the revolution in 2011 and have protected all the headquarters of the government, etc. So involving the military in such a way, I mean, would really, I think it's a bit dangerous, and there is a risk of violence which I would not like to have in my country.
So Fadil, let me bring you in. We've got a problem here where something had to be done, it seems, and actually we should note, and we've seen the pictures of people celebrating the president's decision on the street. The way he went about it is questionable at best, but maybe, and I'm just playing devil's advocate here, maybe he was acting in the interests of the country.
Sure, that's clearly what a lot of people who are celebrating seem to think. The question of whether this was a coup or not, that's certainly a question for legal scholars, and it is being played out in debates currently in Tunisia. It could be a question for political scientists. It's certainly one that opponents of the president and opponents of his concentration of powers currently will make. But I'm more curious to understand why it is that the decision that he made brought out such a celebration in the streets, and why it was that he made this decision at this current moment, and perhaps what the reactions will be going forward. There was not only the health crisis. I mean, Tunisia has seen one of the worst death rates in the world per population in recent weeks. But you also saw that the prime minister, he was just last weekend, he was at a hotel resort, a luxury resort with his ministers. And when an anti-corruption watchdog published this, the president of that watchdog's, his Facebook account was temporarily restricted. At the same time, we also saw images of the prime minister playing tennis, again, at a moment when we're seeing images of people in hospitals without oxygen, without enough oxygen, people and heads of clinics and hospitals crying about their inability to actually take care of their patients. We've seen hospitals overflowing, sometimes corpses being lined up in the hallways of hospitals. So all of this really did feed into massive anger, and really anger at the incompetence or unwillingness of this government to respond to people's basic needs at a health level, but also on an economic level. We've seen the government raising prices of basic consumer goods, reducing subsidies as it's in talks with the IMF to get a new loan. You've seen the prices of several goods increasing at a time when the value of the dinar has gone down in the last several years. So people are also economically suffering, and as part of the COVID response, they've been prevented from going out of their houses or have had a limited ability to economic activity at the same time. So quite a punishing response that we've seen from the government, all feeding into the anger that we saw before Kais Saied's announcement yesterday.
Okay, well, you've raised a lot of points there, Fadil. I think we'd better ask Saida for a response there. I mean, I know we haven't got the time to go through all of those individually, but you can't deny that there have been people out on the street celebrating the fact that this government has fallen, that your party, the government led by your party. How do you respond to all of that?
Obviously, I mean, there is no point to deny that we are facing a dip in dangerous crisis in Tunisia, and this is actually started again not weeks ago, but months ago. We are in a country where the government is functioning with the third of the members of the government, because the other third of the governmental team, which has been appointed by the parliament and voted by the parliament, has been refused to take office by the President of the Republic, Kais Saied. So yes, definitely a very deep crisis of governance and economic crisis, which has been deepened and aggravated by the pandemic. This is something that we can't deny. I mean, there is no point to defend the Prime Minister or the head of the government and to say that to get rid of him, we should actually do a constitutional coup. There is something in the middle. And in the middle, there is a national dialogue, a political dialogue, which should be done with wise people sitting around the table and not be through deploying the army in the parliament, because this is what's happening now. What we have is a confiscation, and I say it again, of the powers. And this, and I'm very... I'm doubting that this methodology is the right one to go out from the crisis. It's rather a way to, again, make this necessary confidence and trust between the different political stakeholders in Tunisia, being less and less here. So, what is urgent for us, the emergency now, is to have democracy back. And I'm not saying that as just a concern of someone from the political class or the elite. I do consider that if we don't solve our problem through a democratic process, which could include actually new elections and anticipated elections at the parliamentary, but also at the presidential levels. And so this is very important because we don't. Yes.
Sorry, you talk about... No, I just want to make sure we hear from our other guests as well. You talk about a democratic process. Mesaoud Romdhani, there can't be one at the moment, can there? If Parliament is frozen for 30 days, then there can be no democratic process. Let's say the 30 days pass, Parliament is unfrozen, then what?
It depends on what the president has in mind. I mean, in reality, in fact, we would wish that before 30 days, I mean, things would be arranged another way, without peacefully, with all the political class trying to find a solution. You know, there is a problem that everybody should be aware of, which is the fact that we are living a very harsh economic situation, a very harsh social situation. That after 10 years now we are really in a real economic deadlock. I mean, if now, and I don't think we can really afford in the coming days another early elections. No.
Well, this is the thing, because, sorry to interrupt you, is that quite often in these situations, the first thing people say is, oh, we need fresh elections. That's not always the answer, is it? And in fact, with the way that Tunisian politics and society seems to be so splintered, that could actually end up solving nothing.
No, it could worsen. I mean, in my point of view, it could worsen the situation. We are living a very special political thing, which, I mean, it's a long story. In the time of Ben Ali, there was no politics, and the political class really out of the blue. In 2011, they found themselves in front of politics, and I mean, what has been done so far is really far from the real politics, far from the demands of people, etc. And that's why the people are exasperated. That's why people are in the streets. But at the same time, we are living in political division that it is really hard. And another is responsible also on this situation. I mean, this dichotomy, this division between the people, between the... if you see the Facebook and you see all the social media, you find people either for or against. You don't find people who try to reason the thing, to say, okay, we have a certain democracy, we have certain steps to follow, etc. We like to save this democracy, we'd like to make it work. Everybody, remember that in 2011, everybody, I intervened many times with the Jazeera, Arabic, English, with many other media, etc. And people really were proud of the Tunisia that is really, for the first time, they are asking for democracy, human rights, and etc. And at the same time, a certain social justice. So now, having a negation of all that, whatever the political party or the person who is doing that, is really harming what happened in 2011, and is doing also harm to those young people who have been there, who are asking for the situation to improve, to these underprivileged regions like Sidi Bouzid, Gafsa Karawan, etc., and all these places, who are expecting things, to be better in the years to come.
Fadil, let's bring Fadil back in. So our last two guests have talked about issues like elections. There's been the revolution. There was the constitution in 2014. This has all actually only happened over 10 years, hasn't it? It's still, we've got to remember, it's still a really young democracy here, and there's still plenty of work to do. What would you see as being the next step?
Well, I mean, these sort of institutions that were created after the 2011 revolution, I mean, these are institutions that in many ways are, they're following a framework of a liberal democracy that are, as in the words of one protester, these are 300-year-old institutions. These are tools from 300 years ago, but people who went in the streets in 2011 had created something completely new with the revolution, and were expecting something new. They were not necessarily calling for a new constitution or a new parliament. When you're looking at the democratic legitimacy of parliament, okay, so they are elected, but you also have to look at the current president. He received almost as many votes as all members of the parliament in the last 2019 elections, which also gives him a level of legitimacy in the eyes of people. But,
yeah, can I quickly ask you about him? Sorry, just quickly, because
just say, if I may finish this point, if you actually ask people, is the parliament in the last few years, are they responding to the needs of the people? Are they debating and responding to the needs, whatever sector it is, whether it's economically, environment, labor issues, agricultural issues? Are they responding to the needs of the people? They would say, no, this is not necessarily a democratic institution, which is part of the reason why we've seen lower and lower turnout for every elections, especially at the parliamentary level in the last few years.
Can you tell me quickly about President Kais Saied? I think he's an interesting character. I've read reports about people feel, he can be quite awkward, and he's very, very formal, and he speaks classic Arabic and things like this. I mean, he seems an interesting character for a young democracy.
We were following the election campaign. It was something that we were grappling with, trying to figure out who this outsider was. In many ways, it was quite confusing because he didn't have a traditional media campaign. It may have been even just networks of former students. He had taught for many years as a constitutional law professor at the law faculty, and many of his students were actually very happy about his candidacy, who had quite a lot of faith in him, also as an outsider, because people at that time were quite fed up with traditional politicians. I mean, when you saw the runoff for the elections for the president, it was between him and a businessman who has styled himself as an outsider. I wouldn't say he's an outsider, but he certainly styled himself as an outsider. This is the kind of person who immediately appealed to people, even without a very strong media campaign or a traditional election campaign.
Right. We're just running out of time now, so Saida, I just want a final word from you about, what we do in the immediate future here. Given that the president seems to have suspended all these different parts of power, the parliament and the speaker and the constitutional court and all these things, would you welcome mediation, assistance, Arab League, another country, something like that?
Yeah, just a very, very, very quick comment on what I've just heard about President Kais Saied. People should not also forget about the fact that Ennahda, of all political parties, has been campaigning very hardly for them to get on to win the second turn of the election. He is, I think, one of the best representation of a failure from political parties this last 9 to 10 years to be able to adapt to the moving of the situation in Tunisia, to the transformation of the society, to the needs as well of a very demanding and conscious society and population. What are the next steps? For us, it's very easy. We demand that the parliament reopen. As a member of the parliament, I was denied access to the building today by the army, and this is something which is very dangerous and which is definitely not in the constitution. And I would love to hear people who are defending legitimacy, democracy, and the democratic transition in Tunisia talk about what what is the role of the army today? What is doing the army inside the parliamentary building?
Right.
This is the first thing. Secondly, we are asking for a national dialogue. Exactly as we've been doing this last month. And we think definitely that the UGTT, that all the social organizations, national organizations in Tunisia should play a role of facilitation. Obviously, if there is a need for a debate to change the political regime in Tunisia, let's do it.
Yeah.
If there is a need for a debate to change the electoral system in Tunisia, let's do it as well. But also, I think that we should agree on the necessity of anticipated elections.
Saida Ounissi, Mesaoud Romdhani and Fadil Ali Reza, thank you so much for your time today and your expertise. We really do appreciate it. And thank you for watching. There is always more for you online. First stop is aljazeera.com, where you can see this and any of our previous editions of the show. Then facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. Plenty of discussion there, as well as on Twitter @AJ Inside Story for the show and @Kamahl AJE if you want to get in touch with me directly. I'm Kamahl Santamaria from the whole team. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again soon.